All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission. Today, we're reviewing on-ramp fellowship proposals for the 2022 cohort, specifically within the discipline of visual arts. This is our first group for visual arts. Our second group will be later this afternoon. But I am Jordan Adams, Artist Services Program Manager of the IAC. Today is Thursday, August 11, 2022. The panelists are meeting on Zoom and the public is observing on YouTube. At this time, we would like the panelists to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are currently located. We'll start with you, Chris.
Sure. Hi, my name is Chris Acton, and I'm a weaver and weaving instructor based out of Chesterton, Indiana.
Henrik.
Hi, my name is Henrik Soderstrom. I'm based in Marion, Indiana, and I'm a sculptor and painter.
I'm Patrick Tisdale. I'm a painter and drawer, and I live in Franklin, Indiana.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And this on your screen is the list of applicants we'll be reviewing today. And we have about 10 applications to review. And I'll stop sharing my screen for now. Okay. So again, this panel is designed to gather feedback that will help the applicant strengthen their fellowship project to advance their career. The discussion will also help IAC staff identify any important modifications applicants may be required to make to their fellowship project before moving forward. I will announce the application we will review. I'll ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide advice to strengthen the fellowship project, focusing on the evaluation criteria from their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or differing comments. We are not looking for consensus. We want the applicant to receive excellent advice from the different perspectives that panelists bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or differing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, that panelist will be placed in the virtual waiting room while the application is discussed. Today, I do not believe we have any. But finally, once the application has been discussed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their comments in the online system. It is common for recommendations to change as a result of this broader discussion. These changes save automatically. Are there any questions? Awesome. So we will begin. Our first applicant today is Beatriz Vasquez. And our first reader is Chris.
All right. Beatrice, her proposal incorporated, she's a paper artist, and she talked about working with the senior community, the kind of aging population. And I just want to start out by saying that I think that's just amazing. I think that's a population that's really overlooked. And so I love the fact that she wants to connect her artwork to this specific population of people. So I love where she's coming from there. I think as far as the proposal goes, I had some questions just to kind of clarify and kind of tighten it up. My questions include things like the workshop that she proposes, the workshops. She proposes 6 in the proposal. Are they all the same location? Does that move around? She has art kits that she mentions. And so I wanted to find more information about, are the art kits just for the workshops, or is that a separate item? I wasn't real clear on that. So just looking for some clarification there. She talks about how she's connected to IU, Go Hoosiers. And I just wanted to kind of have her explain that connection. And is that connection linked to this project, or is that just a separate opportunity for her outside of this specific project? One of my other questions was about the people that she's serving during a workshop. Do they all work on the same project? Especially with an aging population, there may be some specific special needs. if they, don't see or hear as well, mobility, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to kind of hear if she had really drilled down as to what that might look like. How do you accommodate for this whole wide range of people that have different ability levels? As far as the feasibility, like I mentioned in the art kits with the materials, I would love to hear a little clarification about how that was different from, there's a line item that says materials for 20 count participants. So just to clarify, I think in general, the art kits component, I just need a little clarity as far as how does that fit into the whole proposal? Is that just a general art kit that people can pick up whenever at this facility, or is that an art kit for this actual workshop? I love the fact that she included a light item to pay herself. I think more proposals that would be better served, because as artists, we do need to be paid. And then in the income section, it appeared to be kind of a repeat of the expenses. So I think just maybe taking another look at the budget would be helpful there. For the community engagement, clearly she has a very strong sense of doing this for this particular demographic and for the community, which I think is wonderful. She mentions an exhibit as part of the proposal. And from what I understand, the exhibit is a collection of pieces from a workshop that Beatriz is putting together. But I just wasn't clear about what that would look like. Like in my head, I didn't have a real clear idea on, is it one exhibit? Is it one piece? That's just a collection of all the items. Is there a reception? Who's invited to this? How does she acknowledge the people that were involved? So overall, I would say from top to bottom, I loved her passion and enthusiasm for this. I like how it's coming together. I just think it needs a little more clarity in a variety of areas, just to tighten it up. Honestly, I think it's a really good idea. That's what I have.
Thank you, Chris. And our second reader is Henrik.
Hi, Beatrice. I loved your proposal also, and your work also, just the intricacy and textural range of the way you're working with paper. It's really, really wonderful to see. In your own work, it seems like you attach lots of sort of wonderful, rich meaning to paper. And I just wondered for the workshops, if participants were able to bring pieces of paper that had meaning, like a ticket stub or, a paper that was personally embedded, what that might add to the narrative elements of the workshop. Because I felt like in your work, as well as in your proposal, the emphasis on narrative being just really closely tied to paper was just this great thing in your own work. It also looked like you had a huge array of community partners for future connections, and that was really great to see. I think that could carry this project way past just the 6 workshops that you're offering. And it brought up this question in my mind about place-based work and place making, place keeping. And especially with the exhibition that Chris brought up, I wondered if that exhibition or the way that the work is created in the workshops could engage in any way with placekeeping or sharing local history, personal narratives. I even thought of organizations like StoryCorps, and if a collaboration with a group like that could allow the narrative components of the work and the participants' stories to go even further. So again, I loved the proposal and the way that it also seems to dovetail with your own work.
Thank you, Henrik. Do we have any new, additional, or differing comments?
Yeah, I would just wanted to give praise for the idea that she's clearly a leader, and she's got this project in mind. And I was having a conversation with a friend last night about the difference between mission and vision. And I can see so much of that in this project, the mission being kind of the action of this project itself, but then the greater vision of including interns and as a leader, like kind of multiplying in that way is so smart. because it can open up doors and opportunities for not just teaching these other interns, who are, by the way, getting paid for their time, but also it opens up opportunities for her to learn from them. And I just think that's really smart. And it's a good indication to me that there'll be success in all these endeavors.
Awesome. So if you guys could please finalize your comments in the online system, let me know if you need any more time, but if you're ready to proceed, just give me that thumbs up. Awesome. So our next applicant is Emily Bennett. Our first reader is Henrik.
I loved this proposal from Emily Bennett, and first of all, I just loved your work, the way that it activates space, the texture, the visual rhythm in it, and it seemed like the collaborative work you proposed, which is really thoughtful and smart, I think, in the way that you're planning on engaging kids and teenagers and grown-ups. As the parent of a couple of toddlers, I want to come to this. So I thought you did a great job of just looping in lots of ages into that proposal for your event. And I also felt like your proposal fit with the kind of multivalent color and texture and patterning that's in your work, especially pieces like Interlock and Scribble, that just really had this complexity of color and this sense even of being created at different times or by different people, because of the complexity of the color and texture. So I thought there was this natural connection for me between your own work and the workshop you're proposing. So I wondered, that brought up a question, if since some of your work seems to have a conceptual leaning to it as a sculptor, if there was any way that there could be a conceptual framework that connects the workshop to your own practice. Like, for example, if there's something created in the workshop, if that then is something that you add to, or that the creation of it involves some sort of collection of story or something like that. Your idea of having the workshop, if I remember right, in June, and then the display of it later in July, I thought was really smart, because it creates two contact points for your work in your studio with your audience. So sort of in learning or encountering new things, repetition is really important. So I thought that was really smart. And it made me wonder if perhaps a third contact point after the exhibition could be helpful to get people either to your studio or to your website. For example, from the exhibition, if someone comes to the exhibition and they weren't part of the workshop to create the work in the show, then do you have like a piece of fiber they can take home with them, make something maybe with a found object at home, and then they post that to social media and tag you, or bring that back to your studio and you incorporate that into a new work. So maybe none of that is relevant, but I just thought a third contact point could be an interesting thing to think about. You also, in your proposal, had these wonderful built-in connections to the alpaca farm, where you're getting fiber locally, and of course, any community connections just make the work more rich and sort of root it in place. I had, just before I read your proposal, come across an announcement for a natural dye foraging workshop that was being run as part of a residency elsewhere in the country. And so just seeing that made me wonder if there were further collaborations you could do with fiber producers or dye production, or scientists even who are working in ecological areas in your community. And if some collaboration like that for kids and grownups to learn about preservation or something while they're figuring out sort of where these came from an alpaca farm locally. So that just sort of jogs my imagination that way. But again, I loved your work and your proposal, and just thought you had so many smart ways to connect with multiple people at multiple points through time. So thanks for sharing.
Awesome. Thank you, Henrik. Our second reader is Chris.
Oh, Emily, I love this one. You know, I'm a weaver, so this was just like, and this is for me. This was a really lovely proposal. And Henrik, I love some of the points that you brought up. One of the groups that I'm a part of is called the Great Lakes Watershed, which is an organization. It's actually based out of kind of Michigan, but it's anyone within a 250-mile range. And so if I remember correctly, Emily would be in that. Isn't she in the South Bend area? I forget exactly where she is. But if that's something, you know, they're all about, farming a certain way and natural dyeing. And it's really, they're wonderful granola folks. They're fabulous. And so that might be an interesting resource. My other suggestion was just if there's a weaving and spinning guild in your area, that they could be part of this to help with advertising, to help lend resources. That was kind of my other thought as far as how you can involve other folks and get the word out. Otherwise, I really loved it, and you let me know when it happens, because I'm going to come over, because I thought it was really well done.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you. Are there any new, differing, or additional comments? Okay. We'll go ahead and finalize your comments within the online system. Let me know if you need any more time, but if you are ready to proceed, give me that thumbs up. Okay. Thank you, guys. Our next applicant is Erica Coffing. Our first reader is Patrick.
Yeah, Erica, I like your proposal as a first comment. The only thing that really stood out to me, I'll back up a little bit and say, I love the idea of using a photographer and paying the photographer. I love when the value of people's work is front and center. And I also loved the detail about having a sensitivity reader for the narratives of these of your subjects. I think that's so important, and such a critical detail that I just absolutely loved. The biggest constructive piece I can give is that you might consider your audience, a slight tweak in your audience. How did I put it? The primary audience might be the folks whose empathy may be in need of expansion. So if the project is sort of reframed slightly with that audience in mind, so that you're thinking about how do you reach those people and bring them into a space that is comfortable for them to have true growth. What would this project look like if that focus point was shifted just slightly? It's a slight critique, in my opinion. I think what you're doing and your attention to what the project itself is great. But I just wonder what that little bit of extra thought would do to the end result and achieving your greater goals for this project. And that's what I got.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. And our second reader is Henrik.
Hi, Eric. I love this proposal also. Thanks for sharing. I wondered if, given the nature of the portraiture work you're doing, the way that it engages with who an individual is, what their story is, what their history is, that all of that was so rich. And given that, and given the sort of range of personal experiences that exist in the world, if thinking forward to this project generating perhaps more portrait commissions, like you mentioned, if in the series there's a way to unify the work visually, but also demonstrate a wide range of types of portraiture or ways of integrating personal narrative into it. Maybe there's text in some of them. Maybe some of them are just, shoulders up. Some are full figure, for example. Some maybe are multi-figure. Just any way that you can sort of diversify the type of portrait that you're creating in the series. I think that could open up more commissions for you. It's been my experience that in shows that have a range of work that's still, of course, visually unified as a series, that visitors are just way more prone to find something that sparks them to think, oh, I could commission something like that. So thinking forward to commissions from this, I wonder if a wide range of cropping, scale, mark making could be beneficial. The budget and plans seem detailed and really well thought out, and I just wondered if there were online platforms as well. Like Saatchi is a great one. Saatchi Gallery in London has a great online platform for sales that could open you for commissions to an even wider audience. So that's what I've got. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Henrik. All right, do we have any new, additional, or differing comments?
Yeah, I just had a thought that as I was reading through the proposal, I would like to know more about how she'll select which subjects will be. I mean, this is I love the focus on the LGBTQ, the whole community. I love that. But how do you select who is going to be? I mean, is it five portraits? And so then I think part of the question becomes, is it something that she will reach out and ask them specifically, or is it an open call, or just what does that process look like to narrow it down to 5 for the project? Now I can totally see it being expanded into many more after this. I think it'll be a huge success. So I think it could lead to all kinds of good things. I was just curious about if she had given some thought to how do you start to select the subjects. That was my only additional comment. Otherwise, it was very well done.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else? Okay. Well, take this time to finalize your comments in the online system and give me that thumbs up when you're ready to go. Awesome. And our next applicant is Joanne Roeder. Our first reader is Chris.
All right. I liked this proposal. I think Joanne did a good job. I do have just some questions for her to kind of chew on. I think that first of all, with the goal of using creating a website and social media to promote your work and to kind of develop an online presence is so important these days. So I applaud her for bravely diving into that world because it can be very intimidating. I think that overall, I was just looking for a kind of a clear vision of how all the parts fit together. There's a social media website, the online store, the artist group. There's a lot of kind of moving parts. And I'm going to be the one, I'm sure, that's like, I would like less is more. I would like a smaller project that has a huge impact versus having, 12 things included. That's just my personal opinion. It's how I work. I'm a weaver. So I'm like, I like things very cut and dry and straightforward. So I think my biggest question in Joanne's proposal was the arts organization piece, the network piece. I felt like there's kind of the side where she wants to do the website, the social media, which is amazing. But then this kind of arts network, I would like to hear more about how that all connects together, because I feel like, honestly, you could almost separate that. They could be 2 different projects, that the website and the social media, that could really be this proposal here. And you can develop community engagement around that because, online community is a whole big opportunity right there. So I think in general, for me at least, the proposal would have been better served to either give me a clear vision as to how you want to connect the dots, or break it into 2 parts. That was kind of my overall impression. I would also love to hear a few more details about some of the expenses that went in. there was a membership and dues line. Is that just in general, just for life as an artist, or is it membership related to social media as a scheduling platform? Some of those kind of things. What does that? How does that tie into everything? Also, lines. There was a $900 line in expenses that I didn't feel was marked clearly. I was just curious as to what that went to. And then the quote for the website related estimates, they felt low to me, just as a woman who's gone through it in the last 3-4 years. And I know how expensive it was for me 3-4 years ago, let alone now. So I would have loved to have known if she got like an actual quote from a website designer, or it was just a range that she found, or how that all kind of fits together. But I feel like in general, the proposal was lovely, and I can see where she's going. I can see the path. I can see where she wants to be, and I commend her for that, because it's tricky. Now, once you get there and really get some rhythm, Joanne, it's going to be great. I promise. But yeah, I just feel like there were some opportunities to kind of let us a little more inside your head to see what your ultimate goal was, and how you wanted to. These are the components, these are the elements that I'm going to use to get there. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Our second reader is Patrick.
I think Chris hit a lot of my same thoughts about this. When I read this application, Joanne, it really just reads to me like you're starting a business, and an art business. And I commend you for that. It's not an easy thing to do, to start any business, let alone an art business. So it did strike me that there's kind of that sidebar piece of connecting with other artists and organizations. And it seems like that doesn't quite fit in a business launch, to my mind. Additionally, I think there's a lot of value to be gained from mentors and friends, but if you're putting your work online, I think it's critical to think about paying for a photographer, for example, to take those images and get them online, so that they're not that they represent your work in the best way. And if you do that, if you pay a photographer to get those images for online presence, you can also potentially use those images for prints and the sales of those sort of items. My other concern was a timeline issue. And launching the website, I think it was in October. And in my experience, starting a business and launching a website, it takes way more time than you imagine. So you're first of all like diving into territory that's unknown to you, and you're getting help, but you're also learning along the way. And in the meantime, you're not probably producing the work that actually feeds the passion. So it's a struggle. So that would be my other concern, is looking at that timeline, and just giving yourself plenty of space to let the things happen in a way that makes it the best possible thing for you. The last comment I had was about marketing. I think it would benefit you a lot to think about, and this is advice I'm getting currently and have gotten over and over in the past. Making the work is the first thing, like getting the business structure set up is another thing. But then marketing is kind of a third piece that by the time you get there, you're almost out of energy. So having a marketing plan that kind of guarantees that eyes are going to be on your work, so that potential sales are kind of built into the entire arc of what you're doing, that would be helpful to you, because it's a real bummer to kind of get to like the end of that arc and not get enough people around to see your work in some sort of exhibit, or somehow get them to your website to see the work and that sort of thing. You want it to pay off in the end. So a marketing plan is one way to do that. And I think that's what I got.
Thank you, Patrick. Do we have any new, additional, or differing comments?
Just one quick thing, and it relates to marketing, actually, like Patrick was talking about, that what stood out to me most about your proposal is just the positivity and this kind of mirth in the way that you write about your work and in your work itself. And it's just a hunch, but I wonder if having a filmmaker come to your studio and just have you, while you're painting, maybe talk about your work and your outlook on art and life, could be a really rich series of just 5-minute videos. I put a link in your comments to one by Ndeka Keneally Crosby, who's a great painter, and it's just her painting, drawing, and talking about life. And I wonder if that could go a long way in sort of marketing your work, just as a 5-minute video on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you for that suggestion, Henrik. Okay, take this time to finalize your comments in the online system. Give me that thumbs up when you're ready to go. Awesome. Okay, we will move on to our next applicant, and that is Jonathan Southern. Our first reader is Patrick.
Hi, Jonathan. I do have questions about this application. I love the seed of your inspiration. I think it's hard work to advocate and elevate for victims of any sort of trauma. So I commend that for sure. I guess it's the process of attaining that goal that I have questions about, or criticisms or whatever. So one of the first things I will say is that I wonder if you have training or can get training to engage with these folks, these parents of kids that have passed. It's just I think it would be an important piece to be able to understand what people are going through, and how difficult it could be. Again, with any sort of trauma, it's important to understand at a depth that I hope that you don't understand personally, what they're going through, what it might feel like, how to care for those people in a way that's most appropriate. Additionally, there's mention of partnering with a nonprofit, and that was really unclear to me, how the nonprofit's involved, why they're involved, and how that plays out. So having run a nonprofit for about 6 years now, I know that so much of our energy goes towards fundraising for the things that we're already doing, and we don't have staff and overhead. So who are you partnering with is the first question. I think that to partner with a nonprofit should mean that you have a relationship established already, and I didn't see that in this application. And then the second part was just the question about, if they're helping you to do fundraising, where is that money going? What is that money for? I saw in the budget some things, and this will be the last kind of comment, criticism. There's a line item for the iPad and digital subscriptions, and but the work is on paper and done with graphite. So I'm wondering, like, again, the question I have is, why the iPad and the subscriptions when the final work is done on paper? And is the nonprofit helping to pay for that? Or what are they paying for? So these are all the questions I had as I worked through this application that I just wanted clarity on.
Thank you, Patrick. I think our second reader is Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Certainly, your comments mimicked a lot of my questions and places I want clarification. Kind of like the proposal that we looked at that also included portraits. I am curious, first of all, that Jonathan didn't specify how many portraits he was going to make for the project. And again, the question is, how do you select these folks? How do you select the families for this? And Patrick, I loved your comment about kind of the sensitivity. Like, how do you, this is a really delicate topic, and not everyone's going to want to talk about it. Not everyone. So how do you approach that in a way that's respectful? And yeah, I loved that comment. That was wonderful. Let's see. Yeah, back to kind of how many portraits you want to do. I think that it'll be key to, if the idea is to do one a month, is that feasible? I think it's so easy to, especially when you're writing a proposal, to be like, I'm going to do all the things, and then it takes longer to do these things as you go along. So as you kind of narrow down how many portraits you want to do, I would just give yourself extra time, however long you think it'll take, add about 2 weeks to each one, and just don't try to put too much in, and then focus your energies really clearly on the ones that you are going to do. My other comments kind of came down to community engagement, which touched on the whole nonprofit, how you're working with them. But I think that this kind of hit the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot of community engagement. As I was reading it, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to have some kind of a storytelling element to go with this? To just have a portrait is amazing and can be very impactful. However, is there something that goes with it that then is kind of a springboard for what do you want people to do with this? I think that's kind of one of my kind of questions rolled around in my head as I read it. Is it's one thing to acknowledge these horrible losses due to gun violence. However, you have a great opportunity here to then affect change. What do you want people to do after they see the portraits, after they interact with the families? What is the action that goes with this? And I think to acknowledge the victims is amazing, but it would be only kind of half of the equation. So it doesn't have to be a lot, but I think if you can kind of take it one step further and think, okay, is there, when people come to see these portraits, is there an action you encourage them to take? Is that, do you have them tell their own stories? Is there something else that comes kind of a part two to the project? So yeah, those are my thoughts, but nicely done.
Thank you for sharing, Chris. Do we have any new, additional, or differing comments? Okay, sounds good. Take this time to finalize your comments within the online system. Give me that thumbs up when you're ready to proceed. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Our next applicant is Kathleen Wessel. Our first reader is Henrik.
Hi, Kathleen. Thanks for sharing your work. I felt like the color, the texture, some of the scumbly mark making. There's a painting called The Grove in your portfolio that was just wonderful, sort of like scumbly brushwork. And then Flight of the Dragonfly was another. It was almost like give me a Joseph Cornell as an artist. I wrote in your comments here, just kind of reminded me of his work a little bit. So it was great to see. I also loved what you wrote in your proposal about helping people to feel proud of where they're from, and sort of promoting narratives that do that with images. So I just want to commend that goal. That's really rich and really, really important. I also felt a lot of just optimism and gratitude in the way that you wrote about your work. And I wondered if in presenting your work, maybe putting into your budget a line for hiring a photographer to take really good quality images that are consistent, that represent your work well, would be a good investment. And it can be a cost up front, but so worth it for applying to shows. As far as the venue goes, it looks like you've already forged a connection with a gallery, which is a good thing. if I'm understanding right, that gallery charges you to show your work. I wondered if it could be worth looking into galleries that are perhaps commercial galleries that wouldn't charge you to put an exhibition up, or even other venues in your community beyond the exhibition itself. Since it deals with local history, for example, beyond the initial gallery show, what might it look like to loan paintings out to local businesses that could display them with a link to your website next to it? Or if there is a historic piece of architecture in one of your paintings, what's in that architecture now? Is it a business, and would they want to display that? And that kind of thing can be really helpful in getting your work in front of people who might not hear about the exhibition or might not find themselves at an art gallery on a Friday evening. I also thought that your engagement to find source imagery and places to paint, your ideas for working with the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce, those are wonderful. So I just wanted to commend those. And in reading about your plans to connect with the Visitors Bureau, I also wondered if there were perhaps local historians who you could work with for this project, maybe whose writing could be paired with your paintings, or even maybe there's a children's book that has your painting and then, sort of local history that helps people to feel proud of where they're from. You never know where work like this can go, and the earlier on you forge a connection with, say, a local historian, the more pathways like that open up over time. And then the last question that came to my mind was if there are broader narratives, regional narratives beyond Madison County and Anderson that you could engage with that would broaden the scope or the reach of your work. So for example, the gas boom is a big part of this part of Indiana, or the history of the gas boom in the 1800s, or the railroad going through the Midwest for the first time. So are there sort of bigger stories that are statewide or wider in a regional sense that you could tie into your work that would allow you to then get great images of the show and then send them off to the Visitors Bureau in Illinois and say, hey, I made this series of work. It's about Anderson, but also it engages with this railroad that also went through your town. Would you want to show this? So the more you could forge connections to sort of broader regional specifics, I think that could be super beneficial. And historians are wonderful to talk to find pieces of information like that. So thanks for sharing your work again.
Thank you, Henrik. I'm excited for Kathleen with those suggestions. All right, our second reader is Patrick.
Yeah, Kathleen, I am so impressed with your enthusiasm for the positivity. Your primary motivation of positivity is so contagious. Just in this small little dose of your enthusiasm, I felt myself more enthusiastic about my home, which is so much more important than I have words to express, because in terms of your long-term goals, that enthusiasm and positivity is contagious in a way that will propel you forward in ways that are difficult for most of us, I should say. So it's a marketing plan in and of itself to come at your work with that sort of energy. So whatever it takes to guard that and keep that going, do it. Let's see, similar to another comment I had made earlier, I wondered, just as something to think about, if you could consider an audience that needs to hear that message more specifically. I think I was just reading that your audience is just a broad, general, everybody. So are there little pockets within your community that could use that positive energy, and who are those people, and how do you engage them in a way that isn't just exclusive, but is just considering that facet of your community as in need of that positive energy? Just a thought. And then I think the only other comment I had was your timeline, your budget all seem really good. And I think there's a mention of $400 in sales, and I feel like there's potential for much more sales there. So don't sell yourself short, I guess is the message in that. And that's all I got for you.
Thank you, Patrick. I do want to say one thing on that budget. So Kathleen, I'll work with you to make sure it is balanced. So we won't account for that income, even though I echo Patrick's sentiments, but we'll work to make it all even so that the income, expenses, and in-kind are even. Okay? And we can chat offline about that. With that being said, are there any new, additional, or different comments?
Yeah, I just had a couple things, Jordan. First of all, Henrik, I love your idea of how to scale this. It's one of the things that I had kind of commented about. How do you develop kind of a package? Like, how does this become something that you do in Anderson? Which, by the way, Anderson is very lucky to have you, for sure. But how do you kind of how do you put all these pieces together? That's something you can go to somewhere else and say, here's what I did for the area. I would love to come into your town, your state, whatever it is, and do it there. And one of my thoughts too was that, again, kind of what is the action you want people to take when they see your work? My thought was, as people come to see this beautiful exhibit, is there an essay contest? Is there a poem contest? Is there something else that comes with it then, because they've seen your beautiful pieces? One of my questions would be, how can you determine if you've effectively started to make change in your community? How can you gauge if folks are like, oh yeah, Anderson really is gorgeous? Like, I mean, what does that look like? And I don't have an exact answer for you, but just something for you to kind of ponder is that if the goal is for you to really capture the beautiful little nuggets that form this area, the people that come to view it, interact with it, how do you just get feedback from them? What does that look like to actually start to change their mind? That they're focusing on the beautiful things that are happening versus the things that aren't as impressive, or whatever that is. So like I said, I don't have all the answers for you, but just something for you to think about. Is there some way to kind of make the whole experience just a little more impactful for the area? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, take this time to finalize your comments in the online system. Give me that big thumbs up and get ready to go. Awesome. Thank you, guys. And our next applicant is Lavinia Hale. Our first reader is Patrick.
Lavinia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of comments. I felt like you had, in what I read, everything seemed very clear and thought out, and made sense to me. It seemed like the plan was pretty simple and attainable. The feasibility benchmark seemed to fit nicely. I did make a comment specifically about the frame building as a big plus, because that could be a huge expense. And so kudos to your husband for helping you with that. I know that frames can end up costing more than the work itself is priced at sometimes. Yeah, that's really all I got. I feel like it was a strong application, and that you thought it through.
Awesome. Love to hear it. Thank you, Patrick. Our second reader is Henrik.
Hi, Lavinia. Thanks for sharing your work. Yeah, I second what Patrick said. It was really strong proposal, really well thought out. Your website too just seemed really put together in terms of even searching by price bracket. Just really good foundation that you've set. Let's see here. Sorry, I pulled out the wrong sheet of paper. I wondered if there were additional outreach things that you could do just to reach a wider audience. For example, if state parks could be involved in showing the work, or or even if there are residency opportunities at state parks and national parks that you could look into that could be relevant to the plein air practice that you have for this project. I also wondered if it would be helpful or if it would fit with the project, and maybe not, disregard if not, but if it would fit for bidding on the works to begin based on digital images before the show opens. And if so, if visitor centers at state parks or other organizations relevant to the work could be helpful in sort of promoting sales before the show. Like, could they have images of the work in a book there that has a QR code that goes to bidding that could start before the show opens, for example? Since your practice seems really connected to plein air painting, another possibility that jumped to mind was community engagement efforts with various age groups. So for example, middle school or high school teachers, art teachers, if you connected with them, maybe you visit the classroom, maybe they take their students out plein air painting and then they get an invitation to your show, and maybe their parents are people who buy paintings there. So if broadening the sort of reach of your work, both in terms of community, of course, people experiencing the work, and also just the market of your work, if there are ways that your plein air practice can be really dynamic there, I wonder how that could work. And that was what I had.
Thank you, Henry. Do we have any additional comments?
Yep. First of all, I used to work at a local art center, and we had a very active plein air group. So I have kind of a soft spot for the plein air painters. I think they're amazing and so hard to paint in the elements. For this proposal, Lavinia, I tend to be a less is more person. I kind of felt like that with the children's class and the critique night and all the other elements, I just don't know that you need that. I think they're lovely. I just don't know that they all, I think it's okay to be like, I'm gonna put on this exhibit and I'm going to, I just kind of feel like there's almost too many elements for me that were happening, because I kind of feel like to do a children's class well, it's a very different skill set, and you don't need that at this time. I think that if the goal is to do this online class and to put together this exhibit, that's huge and amazing, and I think that's enough. I also saw that she had multiple ways to donate back to the gallery. I don't know that you need that, and I don't want to say that they don't need money. Of course, everyone does. However, I think you could have one standard way to donate back to the gallery and leave it at that. I think as I read this, it reminded me so much of me. I've done just a few grants in my day. I mean, not a lot, honestly. But when I first started out, I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this and this and this and this and this. Like it was just all these things, and you get excited, you want to include it all. And I just think that a little bit of editing would help, and just the fact that the Indiana Arts Commission and us as readers, we want you to, it's okay to just focus on one thing that's going to help your career and your community. Like I think that's plenty, at least in my kind of opinion here. So that was just kind of my notes about what to include in the proposal and what things can come later, what things I love the fact she wants to talk to a critique night. That is awesome. That can be something that comes later, or maybe it's a regular piece that comes because of this, because you had this experience putting this exhibit together and taking this great class where you learned all these very cool things. Let's see. I did have a note too in just the feasibility and the budget portion. There's kind of an exhibit sales portion, and it says that's from 50% of the exhibit sales. Lavinia, I'd rather you just say I'm going to pay myself 50%. I would rather that there was some kind of a line item that you just took a chunk of the grant money and said, this is for me, because it's going to be a lot of work and that is okay, versus kind of banking on that, because the 50% of the exhibit sales, while I'm hoping that you make a lot more than that, that's not a surefire thing. And I want to make sure that you are getting what you need to do this project. Otherwise, yeah. I love where she's going with this. I think there's I think there's a lot of good things happen. I would just, for me personally, I would just take a minute and be like, okay, let's drill down. What is really the core of the project and what do I need to do that?
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Okay. We will take this time to finalize comments in the online system. And let me know when you're ready to go. Okay. Thank you, guys. Our next applicant is Norah Amstutz. Sorry, Norah, if I pronounced your last name wrong, but our first reader is Chris.
All right. This proposal was for studio space for a potter. I love this idea. First of all, any kind of opportunity to improve the space that you're working, it really makes such a big difference. So I definitely applaud that goal of creating a space that's dedicated, that you'll have your supplies, you'll have the equipment you need. I think that really is a wonderful way to invest in yourself and your future. So yay, that is a great, I love that start. I love that premise. I did have some questions, just some clarifying questions about, she talks about hosting students. What is the hosting students, does that tie into the studio space? That's kind of the impression that I got, but I just wanted to clarify, is the space gonna be big enough that you have other people working there with you? Just to kind of get, so I can kind of paint a picture in my head for what that looks like when you have students that you're hosting for the summer. I know there was a comment about accessibility for all people. This was referring to the kind of functional pottery that that she's making, that Nora's making, and having it being available for everyone. So this kind of got me thinking: is there, how do you do that? How do you make sure that it's available for everyone? Are there or is there a line of products that are specifically at a lower price point, so people can people that don't have a bigger budget can enjoy those items, versus some that are more elite, that are at a higher price point? I think I just wanted to hear more about her ideas for how do you make it accessible? Because I love the idea of having everyone needs a handmade mug. That I'm on board with that. I'm working on one today. So I just think that that's very important. But I think there is going to be important to be clear about how do you do that? How do you get to everyone? How do you make sure it is accessible for everyone? And what does the marketing for that look like? How do you how do you promote that in such a way that everyone knows that they are invited to look at your items and find something for them? Let's see. In the feasibility, I thought she did a very nice job of spelling everything out. That was wonderful. As far as the community engagement, she mentions a pottery tour in September. And from what I understand, and you can correct me if either of you gentlemen understood something differently, but my understanding is that the pottery tour takes place next month. However, the construction on the studio space will be happening after that. So I don't know if that counts for me. I think I felt like, as far as a community engagement element, I would love to have something that happens once the studio space is finished. I would like to see something or ties into, I'm not saying you have to invite the public to your space, because I realize if it's attached to your house, that may not be a good fit. But I think there's other ways that you can celebrate the fact that that the state of Indiana gave you this money to help contribute towards your studio space. There's things like, is there some kind of like the whole empty bowl idea? I know is real popular right now, but I love that. Is there something, do you work with a local restaurant? The bowls that you made because of the studio space that is now complete. Is there a new line of bowls that comes out because the studio space is available and you be able to do that, and it's somehow tied into that? I just think that the community engagement part there's a lot of options there. I mean, you're creating this amazing studio. What happens because you're creating this amazing studio, and how do you connect that to people in your community physically or virtually? I think that I kind of like that idea too, because if you already have an online presence, how do you talk to those folks as well, because you have this this very cool new space. So but I love it. I loved her work. I thought it really spoke to me, but I love some pottery. So so that wasn't a big reach. Otherwise, yeah, I would just say that for me, I just need the community engagement. I thought for me was kind of missing, but I love where she's going, and I love the idea of functional pottery, because I think you see a lot of kind of decorative pottery, and that's all fine and good, but I want the piece that I'm going to put my tea in every day. So I think that was I love kind of her passion to start with there.
Thank you, Chris. I do want to add a point of clarity, and I may have been wrong. So the fellowship period is from September of this year to August 31st of next year. So I think that pottery tour is September of next year that she's referring to. But I'm not sure, but I think that's what I was reading from that.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying then. And then I love the idea of the pottery tour. I should have mentioned that too. I think it's great that she's going to have artists there that do different things and they can interact with the public. I mean, I certainly think there's a lot of value in the pottery tour. So certainly if that, and I'll be curious to see what you gentlemen think, but if that can count as her, I mean, I'm all for that. When I looked at the timing of it, I thought, well, that seems like community engagement before you've done the project, and that seemed backwards. So, okay, thank you, Jordan.
You're welcome. And our second reader is Patrick.
Yeah. Hey, Nora, I looked at this application. I have a background as a contractor. And so I look at this application kind of as a building project of sorts. But I feel like you've given me enough information to justify a building project for your art. I think that it seems completely reasonable, like in the space that you're in your life, as a student and engaging in a community, to have a space that's yours and it's functional and it works well for you makes a ton of sense. And some of the things that stood out were, well, I wrote in my comments, the building project is grounded in the ideas of putting down roots. And it's parallel to the activity of making work from local sources, which I think is beautiful. So you're not only thinking about, you're not just thinking about building a space for you to do work. You're thinking about, this is a home for me. I'm going to use local resources to create my work and look forward to the moments where I can invite people into the space to see where everything's being done. So I really, really appreciate that. I can see it in your application, and I think it's the kind of value that artists generally bring when they're doing their work to their community. I thought the plan, sort of like Jordan was mentioning, I read that tour as something that was down the road. So if I missed the detail, I don't know. I just assumed that it fell in line with get the project done, get into the schooling, and then the tour is going to come there on the heels, and you already know about it. You're just anticipating it. As a contractor, I had a caution about, well, first of all, having professionals do the work is a big deal. Have the space done well with people that are licensed to do the work and can do it well and get you the right kind of electricity in there for all of your needs. But just recently, like acquisition of materials can be an issue, just as a heads up. And materials can be, the price of that stuff can fluctuate kind of wildly in the recent past. It has, at least. So just something to look out for with that. And other than that, I felt very positive about this application. I could see where your head's at, and I like it. I think building the studio will help leverage you forward in your work and career.
Thank you, Patrick. Do we have any additional comments?
Just quickly, I also love this proposal, and as far as community engagement goes, a precedent project that came to mind was Lucia and York Orta, who are sculptors. Their project 70 by 7 a meal came to mind. So they're ceramicists and have just planned this sort of broad-ranging community engagement series that deals with sort of local agriculture and lots of other really interesting pieces within the community. And I also had just a question based on what it looks like. I hope I read this right in your resume, that you'll be starting an MFA program at Notre Dame right around the time this project is finished, which is great. Congratulations. And so just a question based on an experience that I had in grad school would be about your plans for working in your own studio versus working in the studios on campus. I had a colleague in my MFA program when I was working who had a studio locally and did most of their work at their studio, which was great, but they wound up missing out on a lot of networking and sort of opportunities that just came by being around the studios on campus a lot. So that's mostly just a question, like, what would be your plan for that? Or is the Notre Dame program set up so that you need your own studio? That's all I had. Thanks for sharing your work.
Thank you, Henrik. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take this time to finalize your comments in the online system. Let me know when you are ready to proceed. Okay, great. So we just have 2 more applications, and our next applicant is Tammeron Jonesfrancis, and our first reader is Patrick.
Hey, Tammeron. So here again, I read this as a building project, and but I do have some concerns with this one, and I'll try to articulate them as best as I can. One of the things, again, I have a construction background, so I saw that there is knowledge in terms of architecture, but in terms of construction, it seemed like there was little oversight involved, and the project was going to happen kind of within a tight little group of people, and that concerns me, just again as someone with a background in construction, because you're going to be inviting people into this space, and as someone who builds things, it's hard for me to sign off on work when it's done by people that don't generally do that, and maybe I'm missing some background, or I am definitely giving credit to the knowledge when it comes to architecture and whatnot, but that was a concern of mine. It stood out, so I wanted to be clear about that. I guess the other thing I wrote in my comments was that the proposal kind of reads as a business's building plans, and doesn't quite specify an existing like student roster or exhibit, or what are the benefits of this. And another application, it felt like I could see clearly how the building project went hand in hand with some of those community engagement pieces, and I just wasn't seeing it in this application. And yeah, that's really what I have for this application.
Thank you, Patrick. Excuse me. Our next reader is Chris.
Yeah, Patrick, thank you for your comments. I would just I'll just make the statement then. And I know I talked to Jordan a little bit about this, but for both this one and the prior one, I know it sounds like to me that the applicants were encouraged that they could say that this $2,000 would be part of a bigger project, like a building project. But for me, I wish in both applications, honestly, I wish there was some kind of this $2,000 would go to this specific thing, which is part of the bigger vision. And here's the bigger vision that is a building. It seems, I don't know, there's some kind of, for me, it didn't, to just say, I would like $2,000 towards a building. I was looking for, I would like this equipment, or I would like this to pay for some component of it versus a general. I think that's what I was looking for. I don't have a problem with building a studio. I think that's amazing. And you should definitely have a studio. I love that. However, I think that, and maybe this is more a comment partially back to the Indiana Arts Commission. And maybe that's just my 2 cents as to how they present this in the future. If the applicants can say, I would like $2,000 towards a 12,000 project, like that kind of idea. For me, I think it would have just read better to show me this is this really key component as part of this building that I would like help with from the Indiana Arts Commission. So that is kind of all a big sidebar as I kind of come into comments about this one. I don't know anything about construction, unlike Patrick. So I didn't know how to gauge whether the costs were reasonable or not. I certainly know that we're in a really weird time right now, and those fees are all kind of changing day by day. But I also was looking for a little clarification on the time frame. Is the project already happening, or is this going to happen next summer? Like I wasn't clear on as far as I was having trouble determining if it was feasible in the time that the grant period is open. And I would say for me, my other big kind of note was just about community engagement. The proposal had a lot of options. This could happen and this could happen. And I was looking for when the project is done, I will do fill in the blank, or while the project is happening, this will concurrently happen with the community or something. So I think there was lots of great ideas for what could happen. I was just looking for a plan. I was looking for a community engagement plan to go with the project in general. So those are my notes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Just to piggyback on our conversation. So no encouragement on anything in particular specifically, but if the project was a part of a larger vision, then we did encourage that. And I don't know if anybody within your group that you reviewed did that, but other people did outline a full project and tell us how the specific 2,000 would contribute to the larger vision. But thank you for those suggestions and points. Really.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. And I would just say maybe that's what I was missing then, is I would like a clearer kind of direction as to this money fits here in this big plan. I don't mind the big plan. I just wanted a very clear, here's the little puzzle piece it will fill. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. Thank you. Do we have any additional differing or new comments?
Just a reference that maybe is helpful or useful regarding what Chris has raised about community engagement. That Rural Studio is a program that's run by Auburn University, and they do all sorts of really interesting community engagement. And
Henrik, you froze for me just a little bit, and I don't know if that translated onto the live stream.
Oh yeah, am I back now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. A reference that came to mind related to what Chris raised about community engagement is Rural Studio at Auburn University. That does a lot of really wonderful, innovative architecture, modular architecture, like you're writing about, and also engages with community in a really meaningful way and documents it beautifully. So maybe looking at their program, especially since you mentioned working with Ball State, I wonder if there could be some useful sort of precedent in Rural Studio's work.
Awesome. Thank you, Henrik, for that suggestion. Okay, I told my panelists that we would stop for a break, but we only have one more. So are you guys good to go? Okay, we'll keep charging. Our last applicant is Victoria Williamstein, and our first reader is Henrik.
Victoria, thanks for sharing your work. I thought, first of all, that there in your paintings was so much lyrical mark making and just really deep layers and this translucency that was just super evocative. So I really enjoyed looking at your work and your proposal. Getting into some more details, I thought that your goal of 20 sales out of state for the work and the card deck is a good benchmark to shoot for. I wondered if those sales, especially of originals, could be strategic. For example, if you were to sell, since this project seems to deal with well-being and wholeness and art therapy, if sales of originals to counseling offices or art therapy clinics out of state could be a useful sort of strategic sale. And if they'd mind, say, putting your website up next to the work itself in their lobby, and maybe having a note about the card decks that you are producing. Let's see, I also thought about, since you're mentioning podcasting as part of the project, I thought that's great, a great avenue of content creation, especially since language and sort of wholeness and healing seems to play such a big role in this, in addition to the paintings themselves. So I wondered if there were also established content creators in the art therapy space who are doing podcasts already with large listenerships, and if you could be a guest on any of those podcasts, that might be really worth sending a few messages about, or just seeing if you know someone who knows someone who runs a podcast like that. I know I've found so many podcasts that are new through that individual being a guest on something I already follow. I thought that the decks sounded really good, and I'm just looking for a number I wrote down here. It seemed like it was like 4,200, if I'm remembering right, for printing. That was in your budget. It seemed high for me, even given the circle die cutting that is, of course, a custom thing. So I wondered if it would be worth looking into for your budget, maybe purchasing or even having made your own custom die cutter if it's a 6-inch radius consistently. I wonder if you could chop half of the cost off your printing if they're not doing the custom cutting for you, and just do that in your home. If that works with the scale. I know that gets tiresome. As far as the decks themselves go, I love the idea of getting your work out that way. And I wondered if having sort of priced tiers of those packages could be an interesting thing to think about. Say, for example, there's an initial tier, which is what you're thinking of, which is just the card deck. Could there be higher tiers at a higher price point that also include maybe curated art materials you're sending with the deck, or products from herbalists who you're already working with, it looks like, or readings, for example? Or could you work with the herbalist shop that it looks like you're already connected with to, say, collaborate on a sort of larger box that would have your card deck and also other things in it? So that was all that I had. So thanks again for sharing your work and your proposal.
Thank you, Eric. And our next reader is Chris.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for this. It's a really interesting idea. I had some feasibility questions and feasibility / kind of general project questions. First of all, about the workshops. I would love to hear more about that. What happens during the workshop? What is the focus? I think personal growth is a big, enormous world, and it would behoove us to pick one tiny corner of it. So what does that look like? What's that topic that you feel passionately about and want to help people with, or open up dialogue, or pose questions, or whatever that looks like? I would love to hear just more about what goes into the workshop. And forgive me if I missed it, but I didn't see a cost for what the workshop was. There's something about the cost of a deck of cards. However, that was confusing for me, was that you pay for a deck of cards and you get a workshop or something to that effect. So someone correct me if I missed something there. And I just thought, for this workshop, how do you market it? Who do you reach out to? How do you, and that goes back to, I think, what corner of personal growth you want to talk about. So how do you then find those people and share with them the opportunity for this? As for the cards themselves, like I said, I was a little confused about how the cards will be sold. I saw printing costs. That was for how many? If someone wants to just buy a deck and doesn't want to do a workshop, is that possible? Like there's some of those kind of things I felt like could be just kicked around a little bit more just to get a little more clarity. Let's see. As for the podcast, ooh, I love the podcast idea. I think that is really, really cool. Podcasting is, I don't think it's going anywhere. It's growing so fast, and it's just a wonderful medium. So I love that idea. However, I would love to hear more about what does that look like? What is there a theme? Again, that kind of goes back to what is it going to be about? The art, the personal growth, both. What does that look like? How often is it released? What kind of value what's the goal of doing the podcast? I mean, of course, to raise awareness for you and what you're doing. However, the best podcasts are providing a value to your listeners. And what is your goal at the end of each podcast? What do you want them to walk away from? And then also, I think there's also a component of how does this help your overall plan to grow as an artist? Does the podcast then drive them back to your website? Does it drive them to a workshop? What is kind of hate the word funnel, but what is how does everything tie into each other so that it helps you to grow your audience by 30%, since that was one of your goals, and just that you're getting paid more as an artist, and just the kind of sustainability. How do you keep it going? The one thing I would caution is that from someone who does a short 7-minute video every week, it is a heck of a lot of work. So the idea of just doing a podcast, while that may seem like I'll turn on a recorder and then I'll release it. Voila. It doesn't typically come out like that way. So I would just caution that there's going to be work in the setup. There's going to be each week there'll be editing. There's some of those kind of things. So I think the podcasting element that's big, and it would be good to just take a minute and really give yourself time to figure that out and to allow. Now, if you decide you want to do a podcast once a month, that's great by me. Do it once a month. However, if you start out as doing a podcast once a week and then it becomes once a month and that's once a quarter, that's not so great. Consistency is going to help you when it comes to any kind of online marketing like that. So I would almost err on doing fewer of them and then adding more as you get into the groove, instead of biting off more you can chew right out of the gates. So just those are all kind of, from my experience, things to ponder. As far as community engagement, I mean, certainly, like I mentioned, I think the podcast can be a great vehicle for community engagement. And is there a community element when it comes to the card decks? Are there people in the community that are connected to the creation of them, to the formation, to how that product actually talks to the people in the workshop? There's something about, I'm just missing a little bit as far as how the community engagement can work. I think there's just so many opportunities. I think it's just a matter of narrowing down which opportunities you want to take advantage of. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Do we have any additional comments?
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of what Chris said is right on point. And what she didn't say, what she said already a couple of times, was less is more. I do think a podcast could be seen as a completely separate project. Production for things like that can take a ton of time, and she is absolutely right when it comes to consistency and expectations set up front and that sort of thing. Again, another kind of echo, the printmaking cost is listed as $47.88, and I was just concerned about the risk there. Just as a business, you're spending a lot of money up front on a product, and I think the comment I wrote was, I would like to understand how your project is going to engage in the community before workshops are paid for, which include the cost of the cards, and before the podcast is produced and put out there. So what is your plan ahead of that to ensure that you're recouping all these costs and profiting after the fact?
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Victoria was our final applicant. If you would take this time to finalize your comments for Victoria in the online system. Okay, good. Okay, great. And so that is our final applicant, again, like I said. And this concludes the cohort panel discussion for our 2022 On-Ramp Fellowship applicants. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.